Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is MTG Ghoul Dude, and this is going to be like a quick video I wanted to do to kind of highlight some of the cards you might want to look out for when you're going into this brand new Foundations pre-release. So we all know the Fracture foils are going to be out of this world, but here I just wanted to point out a few cards that I thought would be good, and a few cards that are actually showing out to be, pretty good already, as of pre-release. Whether the prices will drop if you're watching this later, it's probably more than likely, but some of these are going to get a lot of play, and some of these are just, good value during pre-release times. So, like I said, I'm going to be doing a few cards that I know are right now have a very high pre-sale point because pre-release is just this weekend. So I hope everybody enjoys their pre-release weekend. But without further ado, let's go on ahead and get into the cards. Starting off with the Bloodthirsty Conqueror for 3 and 2 black. This is a 5/5, and this is a mythic Vampire Knight with flying and death touch. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So this one is one of those cards where it goes ham sandwich with any of those good, combo cards like the Sanguine Bond combo. You know what I'm saying? Sanguine Blood or Exquisite Bond combo. So what it's however you want to put it. But this is another one of those pieces that you can add to just throw in a vampire deck or kind of like just throw in a a life gain matters deck. Moving on to just the all around good doubling season for 4 and a green. This is an enchantment, and if an effect would create one or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. If an effect would put one or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many of those counters on that permanent instead. It goes without saying. If you read the card, it explains the card. And man, is this a well needed reprint. Right now, it's sitting at about just on pre-sale, sitting at about 20 to 30 depending on where you look at it. But this is, like I said, this is a great reprint, and I'm curious to see how this reacts in a standard meta. I don't remember a time that it was in a standard meta, not while I've been playing, and for this to be in a standard game, this seems pretty cool. I feel like this is going to create a lot of more slower, high power games, maybe, but that'll be up for time to tell. When this is another new card, the Sire of Seven Deaths. Oh goodness! So this is in a 7 generic Eldrazi that is a 7/7 with 7 keywords: First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink, and Ward. Pay 7 life. So this is just going to be one of those heavy hitters that's going to people are going to try and sort into different all kinds of decks. Like I can already see Eldrazi Tron looking at this one. Probably. I mean, the pay 7 life is a hefty toll to pay just to interact with it. But it doesn't have anything else besides when it comes to evasion for spells or targeting besides the ward. So that's actually pretty cool. This I feel this is gonna see some play, and that's why it seems like it hails such a hefty price tag. So, like I said, if you pull one of these, looks like you can almost pay for half of your pre-release. Kaito Cunning Infiltrator is coming in at the mid 15s, 20s in that area, depending on where you look. For 1 and 2 blue, this is a legendary Planeswalker Kaito. Starts out with 3 loyalty, and it has a static ability. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on Kaito, which is pretty wild, especially if you can get around with the basic creatures. Up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card, then discard a card, so it fuels itself. And its -2 is create a 2/1 blue ninja creature token, and it's -9 that says you get an emblem whenever a player casts a spell. you create a 2/1 blue ninja creature token, which is kind of like a Rhystic Study, but this you get bodies on the board, which is still pretty good. This is really good. I could see this going in ninja decks. I can see this going in like control decks in 60 card meta. So many options. And finally, in the heavy hitters, we get the Twin Flame Tyrant, coming in at about the same range as Kaito. For 3 and 2 red, this is a 3/5 creature dragon. This is a mythic with flying, and if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage instead. Wow. Yeah. And I love the flavor text on this one. It says job only paid for 1 head. I'm out. That's still pretty cool. But yeah, a double dam. Excuse me, guys. A damage doubler, but it's a little more interactive. And it's a source, and it's not a red source. It's not an artifact source. It's just a source. So this could go in like dragon decks. It could go in decks that are looking to spell damage. I can think of a couple commanders, like any deck that runs Terror of the Peaks, any Torbrand, definitely one of those. Solpham. This is just going to be one of those breakout cards for those decks that don't need another a doubler, but they're getting one anyway. So now let's move on to some of the cards that I personally think you should look out for if you're wanting to build or upgrade for Commander. Cards that I think will do good and probably are cards you should be on the lookout for. So starting off with white, we have Celestial Armor for 2 and a white. This is an artifact equipment with flash. When this equipment enters, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has flying, and then you can equip it for 3 and a white to any creature. So you may be saying, well, this is like so situational when we already have Mithril Coat. And yes, I agree. That is great. But the thing with the Mithril Coat is it's indestructible all the time. But when you cast this, it's hexproof. So yeah, you might be able to skip the path. You might be able to skip the Blasphemous Act for a turn, but you can also skip the Path to Exiles, which is also very, very important. So I feel like this card would be right up in there with like cards like Mithril Coat and stuff like that, especially since you can play this at flash speed to give, even give a boost. This is like a boost spell out of nowhere. Herald of Eternal Dawn for 4 and 3 white. This is a 6/6 angel, also with flash, and it also has flying. And you can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. These types of effects are always around in Magic, and there are always ways to try to break them. There is what's it called? There's the Lich's Mirror, stuff like that. Oh, excuse me. And cards like that are always busted breakarounds. Everybody's going to want to build that one deck that, says you can't lose, and they protect the mess out of this, or all the other effects that keep them alive when they shouldn't be. Also, this is one of those cards that go really good with taking extra turn spells, because you can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. So there you go. Raise the Past for 2 and 2 white. Return all creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is a sorcery. So I feel this one right here is going to see play in a lot of decks that have white, because not only is the meta speeding up in a way, commander decks are getting more lowered curve. They're getting more lower mana value, high power creatures. And I feel like this is just going to get better the longer we get more Magic cards. So don't sleep on Raise the Past. I feel like this is going to be doing a lot of work in the future. Valkyrie's Call for 3 and 2 white. This is an enchantment. Whenever a non-token, non-angel creature you control dies, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. It has flying, and is an angel in addition to its other types. Man, oh man, I do not have to tell you guys how amazing this is going to be in Giada decks. Decks that function similar to Giada, decks that love angels. I mean, this is just going to be great. And not only that, I feel like Kaalia decks are going to love this, even though it's really mana intensive for 3 and 2 white. But, you know, who doesn't want a Kaalia back from the graveyard, just right back on the battlefield? This is a commander replacement effect, especially if you're playing Giada, because this is great. This is going to slot into a good bit of decks, especially decks that are sacrifice outlets for their own creatures, that love to sacrifice their own creatures. This is just kind of like another Luminous Broodmoth, but less targetable because it is an enchantment, and this is a mythic. Archmage of Runes for 3 and 2 blue. This is a 3/6 giant wizard. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. We all love cheaper spells. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. Man, oh man, don't we just love drawing cards in blue? Yes, that's true. So with the reduction, and like I said, we're already playing it, you know, mana value 3 and under for the most, to get in the most out of our deck. So playing this at 5 might be a little much, but this is a spell payoff that helps you loop into, you know, if you're going to play in Stella Lee deck, this helps you keep going if you need to keep digging to find that one combo spell. If you're playing like Orvar, this is great because it makes your instant or sorcery spells cost 1 less, and you can double this because it's a non-legendary creature and you can just keep making doubles of it. This is a great card all around, I feel like. Abysmal Harvester for 1 and 2 black. This is a 3/2 Demon Warlock, and with some amazing art, may I say. It has one ability. Tap it, exile target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn. Keywords: a graveyard. This turn. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare in addition to its other types, then exile all other nightmare tokens you control. So, the card that doesn't need to be in a deck that this card is in is Maskwood Nexus, or anything that makes all of your creatures one type. But if you say you lose your commander, guess what? Now you can exile it, put a copy of it onto the battlefield, and then put it back in the command zone. So you still technically can have your commander. If your opponents are doing some broken stuff with a creature, all right, pop that creature, then tap your harvester and exile it. Now they can't even get it back. And then you get a copy of it, which is amazing. And then once it untaps, guess what? You can tap it again to do it again. I feel like this has a very high ceiling and a very mid floor. Because, I mean, even if you're not playing against creature-based decks, you can still build around this in your own deck to abuse enter the battlefield triggers, to leave the battlefield triggers, sacrifice fodder. This is just going to be a good card all the way around, and it's just going to torment your opponents if you get it. Now we're moving on to probably the first and only Planeswalker in this list, Chandra Flameshaper. For 5 and 2 red, this is a legendary Planeswalker, Chandra, starting out with 6 loyalty. This one doesn't have a static ability, and this is also a mythic. For her +2, you add 3 mana. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. Choose one. You may play that card this turn. It's a Jeska's Will on a +2. That's pretty wild. +1, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste. At the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token. Once again, Put it in a deck to abuse ETB triggers, LTB triggers. The ceiling is endless. The floor is kind of low with this one. The -4 is Chandra deals 8 damage divided as you choose among any any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. So this can help deal with other planeswalkers. Something of note is you can actually ultimate this one as soon as it comes in. So this kind of reminds me of Jeska, Thrice Reborn, with the mana effect, with the damage effect. The copy effect is something that Red actually does quite often, even in this set. The +2 actually reminds me of like a Jeska's Will type effect. So this is could actually see some good play in decks that are looking to just abuse the top and exile spells and just play spells from exile. Oh man, this is a big one. Rite of the Dragoncaller for 4 and 2 red. This is an enchantment, mythic enchantment that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a dragon. Play a lightning bolt, make a Dargon. Might as well call it Dargon Bolt. You play an expedite to put it on your 5/5 to give it haste. Now guess what? You got another 5/5 coming. If you can find a way to give all of your creatures haste, then you just make it a whole lot easier to just stomp on your opponent. And I feel like it should be said that if you can Rite of the Dragoncaller as you put another dragon, I don't know, Tear the Peaks, onto the battlefield, all right, you cast 1 mana spells. You could, let me tell you where this would go. And this is going to be really out there for me, especially. You could put this in Zada Hedron Grinder decks and just swarm the board and just take over. Then you just need to just throw in a Tear the Peaks. That way you could just give, just throw some damage on there. And plus, any spell that targets and makes a token, a creature token, is already going to be good. So whenever you're making tokens with this and then making all of your creatures huge, this is just going to be awesome. I feel like I've already put these cards in decks and I don't even have decks for it. Well, the Diada deck, I'd probably put some of those cards in it, but moving on. Into green, we have Preposterous Proportions. Say that 10 times fast. For 5 and 2 green, yes, this is a 7 mana spell at sorcery speed. Creatures you control get +1, +10, +10, and gain vigilance until end of turn. Yes, this is almost Craterhoof level, but this is an undisputed 10 and vigilance. We've seen a lot of planeswalkers in the past that Vivian specifically does stuff like this. Garruk does it. There's not a lot of other planeswalkers that do this effect. But the Gatebreaker Ram, the aforementioned Craterhoof Behemoth, all do effects similar to this. So if you can already have Trample in a deck, this is just an extra Craterhoof. Especially if you go wide enough to where it doesn't even matter if your opponents can get around it. And the only difference is you can use spells to make Craterhoof uncounterable. Making your green spells uncounterable is a little bit harder. So this is how I see it. It's going to be good, but it's going to be real situational, especially when it's like turn 1. It's you're open in your opening hand and you have no creatures in your hand. This is going to be one of those cards that you definitely want to mulligan away. And now we get into the colorless. And this is a card, they have been making these cards for the past 2 or 3 sets. I know for a fact they did it for Bloomburrow because they made the Patchwork Banner. And that card is amazing. It's a mana rock and an anthem. You can't get no better for that for tribal, except when you play the Banner of Kinship. Because for 5 generic mana, any deck can play this. Any tribe can get in on this love. As this artifact enters, choose a creature type. This artifact enters with a fellowship counter on it for each creature you control of the chosen type. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, as soon as I heard fellowship counter, I thought of the Lord of the Rings set. And if you can find a way to slot this into one of them decks, you are awesome. Because trying to find a way to get hobbits on the fellowship with fellowship counters huge would be amazing. But to continue on with what the card actually does, creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each fellowship counter on this artifact. Oh man, proliferating, doubling, counters. If you can find a way to do all that, that is amazing. And then especially if you have a small tribe that just keeps popping out creatures, goblins, rabbits, anything that just multiplies like rats. Yep, I didn't mean to do that one, but it came out anyway. Those are going to be the decks that love this. Vampires, oh my goodness, Edgar Markov would love this card. If you have an Edgar Markov deck, this is just going to be, hurry up, get to 5 mana, slam this down and start slapping vampires onto the ground. Or slap a whole bunch of vampires on the ground, hope there's not a board wipe, and slam this. And now all your vampires are like 10/10s. That would be wild. But yeah, this is one of those cards that I feel like is going to command a hefty price tag. If you've seen Patchwork Banner, it's mid. I've got a foil one. I pulled a foil one, and it's like $7, and I'm just like, eesh, that's a lot for a Mana Rock Anthem. But if you're playing monocolor, a Mana Rock that high deserves, something good to go stapled on with it. And they're just making 3 mana rocks better as we go. And we have one last card to look at. I've kind of rambled on enough as it is, and that is the Soulstone Sanctuary. Not only do I love the art on this card, I love the flavor text, and I love the ability. It is a non-legendary land that is a rare, so it's a little bit easier to come by, and it taps for colorless. It's not great. I'm going to admit it's not great. But for 4, this land becomes a 3/3 creature with vigilance, and all creature types, it's still a land. I will go ahead and say that I feel like, and this even applies to me, I am guilty of this too. I feel like all of the lands that become creatures and that share creature types with any creature type should go in tribal decks. Because here's the thing. You now have a creature that never has summoning sickness. If you don't play it and you activate it the turn it comes in, it never has summoning sickness. It's a base power toughness all the time of one creature type. And depending on the type of creatures you're using this with, it only gets better. So like say if you're playing this with goblins, this is a 3/3 or maybe even a 4/4 with haste as soon as you drop it in, because now it's a creature. That's amazing. If you're playing with zombies, it can become a 4/4 Death Toucher. That's wild. Not only that, but it can get so many more buffs. If this is in a sliver deck, it just becomes a monster, especially if they're not looking for it. His flying, vigilance, trample, death, it just goes off the rails from there. So I feel like we should start playing more lands that tap to become a creature type, or all creature types, or they become a land creature that does have those abilities. But that is going to be it for today. I really appreciate everybody that has shared the content, that loves the content, likes it, comments. Oh man, Foundations is going to be a wild ride, and I'm excited to see where it takes us. I'm kind of excited to jump back into Standard to see if I can get zombies to work again. I know it's a horrible task to try to put myself on, but it's something that I want to do. It's something that I like to do. But let me know down below what your favorite card from Foundations is, and let's have a discussion down in the comment section. But that's going to be it for today, and I'll see you guys next time in the graveyard.